Sekeres Price for Tuesday, May 28th, 2024, coming to you from the Nation Network studio built by Arbor Lee here at the iconic Wall Center in downtown Vancouver. And if you're heading to an event downtown Vancouver, why not make it a staycation? Call the Wall, 604-331-1000. Ask for the Sekeres Price rate. Some blackout dates apply. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price, Grady Sass, hitting switches, conducting things. Big show coming up. That's all brought to you by Applewood Auto Group.
Applewood Infinity in Richmond, your place to get some great deals like the QX60, the 2024 QX60. You can lease at 0.99%. That's a great number for 24 months on all trims. Go take one for a test drive. You'll fall in love. It's all at the Richmond Auto Mall. It's all good at Applewood.
Our poll question today surrounds Elias Pettersson. Is there any part of you that thinks an Elias Pettersson trade is coming this summer? Yes or no? You can vote at Sekeres Price on Twitter or X and YouTube. And this also doubles as our top story, brought to you by Douglas. Just how aggressive are the Vancouver Canucks going to get on the trade market this summer? More on that in a second, but first let's deal with the poll question. I voted yes. There is a part of me that does wonder this, particularly after the poor playoffs and poor second half, particularly after the process that got us to the contract extension, which, of course, as we all know, was not Elias's first choice. I wonder whether he's a Rutherford / Tocchet type player. And, of course, he has a no-move clause with the new contract, but that doesn't kick in until next summer. So, really, and I know this is something that you've been talking about, this is when you have to make the call on Elias. Not just, is he a good player? Do you want him here long-term? They've already made that call. But can you win a championship with him, particularly in the vein of Patrick Allvin and his opening remarks last week about not good enough, we're here to contend, not just get to the second round.
It's a really nuanced topic because, hey, you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs. How many times we heard fan calls for a Willie Nylander trade, for a Mitch Marner trade. And to this point, neither one of those things has happened. And yet with each passing year that there's a lack of playoff success, boy, you got to do something.
Yep.
And it would seem crazy to think of having to move on from either one of those two players, given how good both of those players are.
Yep.
But sometimes you do have to make those judgment calls and make some change. Now, you could argue the Canucks have already made some of those kinds of changes with the trade of Bo Horvat last year. Mm-hmm. And let's remember that for anybody, for the vocal minority here who might be saying that's crazy time. They traded away a 50-goal pace captain in the middle of a career season because they didn't want to ultimately pay for that, even though he was the captain and was on pace to score 50 goals that season. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions. I think the Leafs are going to make a hard decision this summer. I don't know who, but I think they're going to have to make a hard decision. And the thing with the Pettersson decision is normally you just say, well, we'll make those decisions down the road. But with that no move clause window, this is your one time to seamlessly make that decision.
I'll take you back just a year ago, Blake. Bill Zito of the Florida Panthers, one of 3 finalists for NHL Executive of the Year, coming off an otherworldly season from Jonathan Huberdeau and an appearance in the Stanley Cup final. Huberdeau was not great in the playoffs, and Zito made the call, no, don't think we can win with this guy, and made the huge trade with Calgary for Matthew Tkachuk. Was that last year or 2 years ago? It was last year, right?
Now, I will both sides this in this regard.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. 2 years ago, he had the incredible season. Last year, they advanced further to the Stanley Cup Finals after making that trade.
Now, can guys with no move clauses later in their careers be traded? Yes, but it's a smaller opportunity
right
there because you're going to probably have to kowtow to where they want to go.
Other teams have you over a barrel at that point.
So we'll see. Again, there's lots of tea leaves being read here with the way that, of course, management and coaching talked about the player afterwards and minimized the injury that he had. So it's a lot of connecting the dots. I think it's a long shot. I think it would have to be the perfect scenario.
For sure.
But I also think this management team wants to make a splash. Now, maybe a Hronek trade would be splash enough for them. But I don't know.
So I think some of the things you have to consider here. Jim Rutherford is ruthless. We have seen this in the past. Jim Rutherford is not afraid to make huge trades. Patrick Allvin has made more trades than just about any general manager since he got his hands on the wheel here. Think of all the trades the Canucks made earlier last season. Tocchet has a say, and it's clear there was a disconnect between Tocchet and Elias with regards to this injury. Tocchet dismissing it as tendonitis and Elias detailing it. And, as Frank Saravelli said on the Daily Faceoff podcast, and we'll have Frank on later in the week, he thinks the Canucks were caught by surprise that Elias went and started detailing the injury in terms of January and knee, and it was causing me pain, in part because outside of Brock Besser, who was dealing obviously with a much different medical matter, you had Filip Hronek ready to fight Jeff Patterson about covering up the injury and maintaining the lie on his injury. You had Quinn Hughes dismiss any kind of talk of injury with the, age-old, everybody's playing through something. So as Frank notes, that Elias details it doesn't reflect great on the other guys who didn't throw that out there as a reason for playoff performance. The other thing I'll say, and I have a whole bunch of people in my mentions, and Ray is the most recent, why would they sign him to an 8-year contract and then trade him?
Well, they have to. You have to manage the asset at that point.
You have to manage the asset. They needed him to sign that contract one way or the other.
Yes. That's a
because
non-starter.
You did not want to walk him into unrestricted free agency next summer. And frankly, the signing of the 8-year deal makes him more tradable, or at least increases his value.
It's cost certainty.
Because you have cost certainty for the other team, knowing they're going to have them long term, as opposed to trading a restricted free agent heading into his final season before unrestricted free agency, i.e., the predicament they find themselves in here with Filip Hronek, if they're going to entertain the trade. Not to mention, things have changed since he signed that contract. He was piss poor in the playoffs. He started detailing an injury while other guys, for the most part, stayed mum on theirs. And you had the general manager and head coach talking about the hard games in the second half in the playoffs and how you have to push through and prepare yourself to push through. So
Mel on the comments on YouTube, his value isn't exactly an all-time high right now. No, that's for sure.
No, but it's still very, very high. Like, make no mistake. The 31 other teams would like Elias Pettersson.
The other thing to consider is the age-old adage, some of the best trades you make are the ones you don't.
Right.
And out of curiosity, I went through an exercise, Matt. 6 months before Bo Horvat was traded, maybe 4 months, we sent out a tweet. Should the Canucks trade Bo Horvat? A poll. That was a should versus this one, which is, would it surprise you, basically?
And that's all we're asking here.
Yeah. But we sent out a straightforward, should the Canucks trade Bo Horvat? Boy, there's an awful lot of responses in there that say, screw that, trade JT Miller.
Oh, yeah.
And who knows? I think I might have had a similar opinion at that point. I very well may have. So the Canucks don't. They make it. Remember, Miller doesn't have his contract at that point. They don't trade JT Miller. They keep the money for JT Miller and trade Bo Horvat instead. And all JT Miller has been is the backbone of this team for the past 12 months. So you got to be careful. Players can change, players can adapt, and JT Miller has adapted in a different way than what people are asking of Elias Pettersson. But JT Miller changed, JT Miller adapted, and became exactly the kind of player you can win with. I'm sure there was a lot of fans somewhere that were like, you can't win with that guy. He's a cancer in the room, and made all these sort of proclamations. And sure enough, he ends up being the opposite of that when push comes to shove, and when Rick Tocchet certainly comes into the fold. So it's impossible. No one's got the crystal ball of whether they want to, whether they will, whether it would work out.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're debating here.
Tell us about our friends at Douglas, and I'm going to get to a couple of other takes on this topic.
Well, it's been called Canada's best mattress on Canadian living, and you get to find out with absolutely no risk. The industry-leading risk-free trial of 365 nights. If you don't like it, you get a full refund, no questions asked. All you have to do is order yours today at douglas.ca/Canucks Army, and you're in.
Mm-hmm.
You get the most comfortable mattress you can possibly imagine, again, with zero risk. And with the summer coming, do you have AC? No? Don't you have AC? Sleep cool. Their foam keeps you cool through the night. Again, order yours, douglas.ca/Canucks Army.
David on Twitter says, I think what needs to be said that the media in Vancouver is reluctant to do is he should check his attitude at the door. Well, we talked about that last week.
Yeah.
And I think it's wearing thin organization as well as with some fans. Burrs on Twitter says, pretty telling that Tocchet knew he had tendonitis and said he's not injured. He thinks he's soft. Well, yeah. Again, we talked about that May 8th press conference with Tocchet, who went out of his way, unprompted, to say, no, I know there's speculation out there that he's hurt. No, not hurt. He's sick. He was sick that week, missed a practice. And of course, Tocchet had talked earlier in the season about he doesn't like guys missing practice. He feels like there's a lot that can be accomplished in practice, and he didn't like the sort of rest and maintenance days. Thought they were getting a little too liberal with those. Danny makes a good point here and says, even if Rutherford gave the thumbs up, I think Francesco would nix it because of the public blowback, as well as besides Miller, he's the most marketable player on the team. Well, Hughes.
He's not the most marketable in that, they can't trot out him like they trot out Hughes and Miller to speak on behalf of the team, right? So in that, but I mean, still beloved players, a lot of Pettersson jerseys out there in Vancouver.
For sure. And
so
Francesco has rabbit ears, and boy, that would take a hell of a convincing effort, I think.
Yep, but it's a good point. Like, Francesco could absolutely mix it.
Those are the sorts of trades that rise to the level of ownership, and those are the sorts of trades where, well, one of two things. Number one, the owner can nix. Number two, you have to think long and hard as an executive in the owner's charge. Do I want to execute this against the owner's wishes? He may say, hey, it's up to you guys. You're the hockey ops guys.
But if
you know he's not on board,
exactly.
It takes some plums to hit the button.
Yeah.
On that one.
And again, you could get proven wrong the very next year. Moves on to another team and runs roughshod in the playoffs for them.
Now, two other things I want to mention here just before we close the file on this for today, and only for today. I do wonder whether there's rekindled interest with the Carolina Hurricanes. More on them in a second. They are, of course, turning over their hockey operations. Don Waddell, the new president of hockey operations in Columbus, or Tulsky right now has the keys to the kingdom in an interim capacity, although everybody thinks that Tulsky will rise there as he's been a big part of the growth and success of the Carolina Hurricanes. Plus, I guess I would suspect that he will take whatever contract Dundon offers him, and we know that's part of the program in Carolina as well, that the owner is not going to be paying top dollar. And then secondly, there's an old hockey axiom about, whoever gets the best player in the deal wins the deal. And to me, that's an antiquated notion in a salary cap world.
Yeah.
We have seen, I'll give you one of my favorite examples is, there's two big examples. Both of them pivot around the Ottawa Senators. You remember the Erik Karlsson trade?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody thought the San Jose Sharks had won the Erik Karlsson trade, right?
Yeah.
Getting him from the Senators. Josh Norris, Jake Sanderson. You take a look at the haul that the Senators were able to get from the Sharks on the Karlsson deal. Looks pretty damn good, especially given what Karlsson was making.
Especially what he ultimately gave to the San Jose Sharks, which was a great season individually, obviously, with that transcendent 100-point season, but it lifted the team in no particular direction.
Yeah. Then Go ahead.
Well, I just stand in the comments here. Trade Elias to Toronto for Marner. I mean, a lot of people are looking at that as just a underachiever for underachiever, but that's not going to happen, I don't think.
Then you take a look at what the Colorado Avalanche wound up getting for Matt Duchene. Also involved the Auto Centers, that one involving Kyle Turris as well. Bowen Byram, Kamenev, Girard, a first-round pick that didn't work out there.
So it could have been better.
It could have been even better, and a second-round pick that has not yet worked out. But they got contributors, including a couple of defensemen who helped them win a Stanley Cup, and they could have had much more. So, the notion of trading the best player and losing the deal is outdated. In a cap world, you're putting a jigsaw puzzle together, and if you can get several pieces for a big standout piece, particularly if that standout piece is at market value, and you're getting several pieces that are below market value, haven't been paid yet, that's the sort of deal that can work out. And I bring that up only because, needless to say, if the Vancouver Canucks ever entertain a new Elias Pettersson trade, you need a centerman back because you'd be weak at center at that point. You probably want to fill your winger void with that, if not one, a couple, right? And you may, in fact, want to help out your defense scorer, as we know that we got several unrestricted free agent defensemen and a big RFA defenseman. So it would be an avenue to fixing multiple parts of the team if executed correctly and if the demand is what we suspect the demand would be.
Your examples there were Duchene and who? Who was the other one?
Erik Karlsson.
Erik Karlsson.
Were you going to go Jack Eichel? Because I was going to go there.
No, I was just going to
want to go there.
I was just going to say, like, as much as those are all, and all three, if you want to include Eichel too, all three are in the salary cap era. I think there's been a lot of learning during the flat cap of money management.
It's not the worst side, yeah.
And I don't know that you're going to see the one for a bunch trades anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know
not.
if people will open up the cabinets and say, I'm willing to give you 5 pieces for the one guy anymore.
Hey, Ryan O'Reilly from Buffalo to St. Louis. And everybody thought that St. Louis won the trade, and he turns out to win a Stanley Cup there. So in one regard, they did. Buffalo got Tage Thompson back in that deal as one of 5 parts.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, one of them may still help Ryan Johnson, the young one-time first-round defenseman there.
If you're
the Eichel trade, Grady, was what?
It was Alex Tuch, a conditional first, which turned into Noah Ostlund. So there's your center prospect. A conditional second, which turned into Riley Hyde, the Prince George Cougar point producer for Jack Eichel, and a conditional third.
Mm-hmm. So that one is not yet a win for Buffalo, although Alex Tuch is a very good player, but could very easily turn into.
But Eichel turned into a force in the playoffs.
And they won a cup. So it's the sort of deal where even you can, I mean, there's a world where you could argue they lost the deal and won the cup, both of them. Or you just say both teams win the deal.
Yeah.
Which is probably an easier way to put it.
But what's Eichel's cap hit at the time of that trade?
He was making bank. He was making bag.
Like I do wonder if in this climate now you are willing to acquire an $11.5 million cap hit.
8 times 10.
He was at 10 mil per.
Yeah.
You've got to be pretty damn sure that you're acquiring a difference maker. And while no one's going to debate that Elias Pettersson is a great player, I think without a true playoff run, now again they took a leap on Eichel. Eichel didn't have a true playoff run under his belt. They took that risk.
Yeah.
We'll see.
One of the players that has some smoke around them as a trade candidate, and I know someone that has been mentioned in Canucks fan circles, is Winnipeg winger Nikolai Ehlers.
By the way, can I just jump in on the finish of the Eichel thing, the ties that bind? Mm-hmm. Eichel was traded right before his no-move clause kicked in.
Well, and Jack Eichel also requested a trade.
Yeah.
So Buffalo was dealing from a position of somewhat weakness. Matt Duchene in Colorado, Sakic and them had held on to him for quite a while.
Mhm.
After it was clear that he wanted out, you thought the law of diminishing returns would apply there, and that, the longer you hold on to a player that doesn't want to be there, the less likely you are to reap value. So, that also has to be added as context in terms of the deals they made to bring in volume for equality, and to the degree it's worked out for them.
And there was some difference of opinions on his injury. Remember
On
the
his
neck-
medical.
Oh, it was messy. It was
Very
ugly.
good. Hey,
So
it's another tie that binds
Yep.
here, Grady. Good shout. Niklai Ehlers. Really good player. 25 goal, 61 point player, played nearly 16 minutes. One-time top 10 pick in the NHL draft. Of course, could have been a Canuck. They chose Jake Tannen.
Thank you, Jim.
And this, of course, isn't the first good season that Ehlers has had in the National Hockey League. In fact, he's got 3.
And
60
this isn't
points.
even his best. This isn't,
No. So really like the player, and of course he would fill a need for the Vancouver Canucks. What would daunt me about Ehlers is he's got 1 year left at $6 million before he's a UFA. So how willing would the Canucks be? Because that's effectively an eggs in next year's basket deal. And I think because you have Demko and because you have Quinn under contract for 2 and 3 more years, I do wonder whether they would be so bold as to push in to next year, particularly since they made the Zadorov trade. They made the Lindholm trade. There were a lot of people in the market going, okay, is this your best opportunity? Are you going all in? And they demurred. They didn't have the stomach nor the cap space to go further than that.
I think a trade for Ehlers is more something along the lines of Lekramaki and Höglander, something like that.
Because I don't see Hronek.
Well, but then you're
signing
robbing.
there
Yeah,
long term.
Yeah, I mean you're going for high end. I mean,
now he is eligible for a contract extension on July 1st, and if you really loved him and were willing to do that before he plays a game for your club, that's a different acquisition. You're getting long-term value, or at the very least, you're getting long-term player control, knowing it is going to come with a price tag after this coming season. But there's part of me that wonders whether Allvin and Rutherford are kicking themselves for not going further all in this year when it became so abundantly clear that they were at least one scorer off the flank.
the other problem with Nick Ehlers here, 4 goals in 37 career playoff games.
Yeah.
Not great. Not
Like,
great.
if what they're looking for is some more certification of goals in the playoffs, I don't think he's going to be top of the list for them.
Right. Which, of course, also begs the question, if you bring up Lekramaki, where's their stomach for trading futures this summer? Wasn't there at the deadline. They were willing to go to Bristevich, a first-round pick, some mid-round picks for Lindholm and Zadorov, but they weren't willing to go Lekramaki. They weren't willing to go Tom Wielander. They weren't willing to go another first-round pick.
Well, honestly, given what they've got to pay coming up with the OEL buyout in a year's time, where it gets up to 4.5, a guy like Lekramaki, he's going to be huge in that.
Oh, and so is Wielander.
It's basically like you're paying Lekramaki at that point to be that player
and
with that money.
So is Wielander.
So,
like, Wielander has got to be a top 4 guy for you, particularly after Tyler Meyer. Not next year, but the year after, I would think.
So you do have to give to get if you're the Vancouver Canucks, and all the fans want to see better right shot defensemen, want to see a better winger. But what are you giving up? Because you need Wielander and Lekramaki in 2 years. You just do. Because I don't have a ton of supreme confidence in Arturs Silovs or anybody else down there to be skilled players. Maybe to be bottom 6, but I don't see a ton of high-end point-getting skill on the horizon outside of Lekramaki.
Right. So then let me ask you this. If you're not going to take the big swing this summer because you're looking at your future cap situation
Mhm.
because you only have so many prospects that you think are going to make the club here over the next few years and be difference maker or play in forward roles. Is it going to be another summer of using Rick Tocchet and the ability to bet on yourself on a short-term deal as a drawing card? Basically work along the margins where they had great success last year, it must be said.
I think they will try to do that again. Yeah.
You think it's going to be that more than a bigger swing and a more of a revamp?
I think they'll try to. I think they'll like let guys like Lafferty go and try to upgrade.
Some of that, I think some of that is happening irrespective. Blake. Well, I guess what I mean is, do you think they'll just try and take care of their own business? Hronek, Myers, then maybe somebody else out of Lindholm, Joshua.
I think those dollars
and then try and then fill in around it with the likes of the Pia Suitors, with the likes of the Sam Laffertys, with the likes of the
Suitors under contract. Lafferty's not, right? So
no, but that profile
player,
the guy who's waiting still in August for a contract.
Yeah, I mean, I think those will still happen. Zadorov, Lindholm, and Hronek. No, they're all question marks, and I think two of those three could be here. I don't know which two it will be though. So I think that money gets spent to some degree, but hey, if all three players are hell-bent on getting the absolute top dollar and play in the field and all that, then there will be consequences. And obviously it's an RFA situation for Hronek. But again, if his side is hell-bent on top dollar on a long-term or even a medium-term contract, then the Canucks would maybe be forced into a situation where they have to trade that player. So it's going to be interesting. The OEL buyout is looming large here because in combination. Now, here's the miracle play. And it's a miracle. And I don't believe this could happen. If they can find a way to get most of, if not all of the Mikheyev contract off the books, that's a pretty valuable, almost $5 million.
The more I think about that one, the more and more I'm against a buyout.
No buyout. No. There's no chance for a buyout there. No, it's a trade. It's a trade.
I certainly don't want to peel good assets to just move off the contract. I would count more on a bounce back before I'm peeling a second round pick to get rid of Elias Pettersson.
Really?
Yeah. He's a decent defensive player. I agree with.
Sure.
He's got some speed, and this club is not chock full of that. I agree with Allvin that it's a confidence matter. I think a summer and a reset would do him well. I also agree with Allvin that the failure was on management and the coaching staff to put him in that role and not build a better team whereby he could play a lesser role.
And they also don't have a lot of sweeteners left. They've traded a lot of
their picks. Yeah, you're already not picking until the third round in this draft. You have traded out third round picks in 2025 and 2026. So yeah, I'm not big. I'm not big on the buyout because particularly in combination with Ekman Larson, then you're looking at a ton of dead money.
Yeah.
And I'm not fussy about moving out more picks to get off a contract. I would be okay moving out more future picks to bring in a player, but not to get off a player.
But one can
at this stage,
one can beget the other.
It's possible.
You peel a pick and you get $4.75 million to work with. My goodness.
And if that's a free agent,
well, that's 2/3 of Elias Lindholm. Right? You do that, you can all of a sudden go back to Elias. Yep, we meet your number. Here's your number.
Then you have greater need on the wing and yet another.
But again,
bled.
Replacing that player on the margins with one of their Pius Suter like that, you can do that in 2 seconds.
I understand, Blake, I understand that he's replaceable at a cheaper freight. That there's no doubt.
Like much cheaper freight. Yeah.
Right. It's just about like these guys stopped short of another pick for a Jason Zucker.
Mm-hmm.
So you're gonna peel another pick
for
to
2
get off a
for
player?
2 months of work, though, right? For 2
Well,
months of work,
yeah, fair.
versus a player that you want to
Yeah.
invest in for years.
As those of you on YouTube and other video platforms can see, Blake and I are wearing our Vancouver Canadians hats today, and we will be on the Tuesday of every homestand the rest of the way. Now, as for the game today, the club is hoping to make a call on this by 4 p.m. Invite you to go to CanadiansBaseball.com. There's an option there to get alerts, text message alerts. If you are a ticket holder, season ticket member, or someone who's going to be holding C's tickets in the spring and summer here, they'll send you directly a text and let you know the status of each day's game. And understand if things can't get going at the Nat tonight, and it is still raining here in downtown Vancouver.
It is supposed to lighten up in the evening.
Yeah, so fingers crossed
Yeah.
for them. But today, of course, is scheduled superstar appearance from Buck Martinez, and if it can't go down today, I do believe that all parties are going to try and make this happen at a later date. It's a 6-game homestand. The nooner is on Friday, Family Fun Sunday, and there are only a few hundred tickets left for Sunday, so get them. And just around the corner, June 11th, the dog days of summer. Bring your pup to the park and let them soak in the atmosphere at Nat Bailey. Get your tickets 604-872-5232 or CanadiansBaseball.com. I wanted to get to this from Noah Strang of the Daily Hive and Offside, who's, by the way, has done terrific work there. Great hire, Rob Williams, and well done, Noah. Tweet about Arturs Silovs. He had a great playoffs, but one obvious weakness is tracking pucks from distance. The tweet goes on to list 9 goals where he was beat from distance. Just 29 total goals allowed, but he was last in average goal distance of any playoff goaltender. Now, I think Ian Clark is going to get that fixed. I think the Canucks are blessed with one of the great, if not the best goaltender coach the world over. He's already done exceptional work with the likes of Jacob Markstrom, Thatcher Demko, and now along comes Arturs Silovs, and good work is happening there already. But we have also noticed that a bunch of Canucks fans are wondering, musing, boy, Silovs' value pretty high right now, huh? Playoff hero. Coming off last summer, of course, he leads Latvia of all countries to the bronze medal at the World Championships. Cheap contract, up and coming goaltender. Could you solve your winger problem, a top 6 guy, or bring in a right shot defenseman?
Well, especially considering they're very high. They're very high in Nikita Tolopilo behind him.
Yeah.
So it's not like you now don't have a prospect goalie. They would still.
Yeah. Anyways, do you have any time for that show?
I would need to know what the prices are. As we have talked about, the goaltending market has not been a robust one in recent years, with most teams satisfied with what they would perceive to be at least average goaltending, with most good teams thinking, no, our goaltender is average. He's a low cap hit. We're good with that. So investing, paying big assets like a scoring winger to get that goalie, I don't see that from a team. You'd have to be very bereft of any goaltending prospects, I think, and I don't know which team that would necessarily be. So if you could show me that there is that possibility, yeah, I would be open to it, but I don't believe that that's a possibility. I don't believe that market exists as opposed to the market for other players we've talked about.
Well, I think you're going to see Jacob Markstrom and UC Saros traded this summer. Now, those are, of course, frontline.
Right. Pedigree goalies, yeah.
Goaltenders. I wonder if there's enough teams with goaltender need that if they miss out on one of those 2 guys, they would turn their attention to a different profile of guy like an Arturs Silovs. I would, my knee jerk is against that for a number of reasons. Number one, there's nothing wrong with being great in goal and having a backup who can play 25, 27 games and get you victories. And I think that's what they've got to move to, given Thatcher's injury history, and I think this kid can do that for you next year. Not to mention on a good contract. He's an RFA to be, but you're not going to be paying Arturs Silovs a lot of money. He's still very much club controlled here over the next few years. And then secondly, and I had a big Thatcher Demko fan yelling at me about this last week, but you have to prepare for the possibility that in a couple of years now, Thatcher Demko says, it's been a trip, Vancouver, but I want to move on. Whether that's because of team performance or because he's an American and wants to go closer home, whatever the case may be.
Well, how worried?
He still very well could be, Arturs Silovs could still be your goaltender of the future. And that future could start as soon as the 26-27 season.
I'm not so worried about Demko's want to be here just yet. My mind hasn't gone to that point, but my mind has gone to his durability.
Yeah.
And the need for not just an average backup,
right?
A guy that you fully believe can win you a game. Now, I don't know
that Casey Smith was for a large part of this year, a few blips.
And I don't know that Arturs Silovs necessarily stole them any games in the playoffs. He kept them in games.
For sure.
But I don't think he single-handedly won them any.
Well, the 40 save effort was, fair.
So
the 40 save effort was 42. It was extraordinary game. But yes, was it a stealing of the game? Probably not in the typical definition.
Not in the typical definition, I wouldn't say. Right. So, I would be leaning towards just stand pat because I just don't think you get sun, moon, and stars for him at this point anyway.
No, I think you're right. Western Conference Final. Poor Troy from Richmond. He's off for ankle surgery. I was hoping at some point we would see Troy from Richmond in the Oilers lineup, but
not even anymore.
Oh, that's really too bad. Also now in the division, Dan Bilesma's your new coach of the Seattle Kraken.
Mm-hmm.
I know you had mentioned that they need sort of a face and voice. And I guess Dan's, he's a pretty effortless communicator. There's personality there. He's not quite Paul Maurice, but I think he fits somewhat of that bill for the Kraken.
The bigger questions when you talk to people about Dan Bilesma is just the sheer X's and O's.
Yes. That he's more a managing the personalities head coach than he is a tactician. Now, that said, he's, for guys who want a Stanley Cup, he's gone back to the A.
Apparently we're back up and rolling now.
Okay, good.
It seemed really fast.
Good fix, Grady.
Love it when Google Chrome crashes.
Don Waddell's the new president of hockey operations in Columbus. He gets the GM and alternate governor titles as well. And as you wondered, Blake, yeah, John Davidson sort of pushed aside here to a senior advisor role. The comment coming from the owner, Mr. McConnell, about, the more he talked to Don, the more he, believed he's the guy to take him to the next level. So it's also clear that JD wasn't exactly doing all the interviewing here as well. And it looks like JD has now paid the price for last summer and the hiring of Mike Babcock and what he went about with young players asking to look at their phone. And
it was a long run. Long run.
And now you wonder whether a head coaching vacancy will follow, or if Don Waddell is going to keep Pascal Vincent, the head coach there, who took over for Babcock and immediately wanted to show I'm a tough guy too, and I'm going to start benching all our best young players.
Yeah, I think he's an old school coach, and those approaches have not worked. So probably an opportunity to do something a little bit differently there from top to bottom in Columbus. Because let's face it, they haven't shown promise of any sort in a long, long while. So fans there deserve it.
So much so that I wonder, are they just going to add another top pick this year with wherever their pick winds up? Or are they so pissed off there that they're fourth best odds right now, 9.5% of winning first. Oh, sorry, we're past the lottery. They're picking fourth. Are they going to just sit there and take another prospect? Good draft, get a good player there, or are they willing to jumpstart the proceedings a little bit,
right,
and trade fourth overall, or trade one of the young players they do have, whether it's Kent Johnson, Port Moody's Kent Johnson, or Juracek, the defense? There are a lot of assets there that they could possibly move if they wanted to jumpstart the proceedings. And just wanted to wrap up and say we have filled out most of the coaching vacancies in the National Hockey League in what has turned out to be a world still waiting. Winnipeg, of course, has hired Scott Arniel. Seattle now filled. Jersey with Sheldon Keefe. Toronto Maple Leafs with Craig Berube. Could there be more from here? Again, Columbus, who knows? We'll see. San Jose, we have yet to hear from San Jose. But what has been a whirlwind calendar year for coaches in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, it has
like
been.
2/3 of them have turned over.
And
it's incredible.
The rehires have been pretty swift. It seems like a lot of clubs have prioritized getting their coaches. I mean, they don't have a lot of say in draft day and in acquisitions for July 1st, but I mean, there's been a lot of quick hires here, so no one wants to be left with no chairs.
And I bring that up because I think the stability of Rick Tocchet here with this group is only going to get more pronounced and more advantageous to the Vancouver Canucks, particularly if Allvin is correct and what he said last week, that you come to Vancouver, you're going to improve as a player. So even if it's on a 1-year deal, a bet on myself 1-year deal, this coaching staff, but particularly our head coach, is going to make you a better pro and make you a better NHL player going forward, whether that future is here in Vancouver or elsewhere.
It's an interesting question.
That is the pitch they're going to be making, I suspect, Blake, to a lot of these on the margins players as they once again have a busy and important summer of getting better in that area, regardless of what they do at the top of the roster.
It would be very interesting to, we could poll our listeners and viewers here for sure at some point. Does the Jack Adams Award lead to better signings in the offseason? Like, do players seek out, are players comforted to know that there's a coach of the year?
I don't think they seek out. I do think.
Is it a tiebreaker? I want to go here or here. Coach of the year there. Does it have any sway?
Talking to agents, talking to GMs over the years, one of the big considerations for free agents is who's the coach and where would I fit in his lineup and in his system. I think that's massive. And I do think, as Max Lapierre told us several weeks ago, that when you have a coach with Tocchet's history in the league, as a terrific player, and if you're too young, go back and look at some of the clips of Rick Tocchet as a Philadelphia Flyer. Like, oof, what a player! Like, and you know, I'll forever. Was it the '87 Cup final they lost against Edmonton, where Hextall stood on his head? But that was a good Flyers team. In fact, a very good Flyers team. But like, they're going Dave Poulin, Derek Smith down the middle against Gretzky and Messier. And the Flyers pushed that Oilers team like to the limit, in part because they just had sons of guns that weren't going to quit. We're going to give no inch, and Tocchet among them. You know, so a guy's got a history in the league, but, you know, also as Lapierre told us, like, the truth is on his face there. He's got a disjointed nose. He's got scars everywhere. Like, he paid. So when he's asking you to pay the price, you know, that comes from long experience. He's paid the price himself.
More so than the coach of the year, or in combination, I should say, in combination with. They would probably do themselves all sorts of favors, Matt, if they announced the practice facility sometime in the month of June.
Well, there is that now, huh?
Because you were talking about what is part of the equation for a player when they want to know, okay, what's the living situation like? How far is it to practice there? Like, but remember, folks, by the time you're a UFA, you're in your late 20s. And a lot of those guys have young families already at that point. They don't want to be on an hour and a half commute to practice. Oh, that's there. Okay, then we could live there. They sketch it all out when they're looking at their suitors and what it looks like. The Canucks aren't hurting themselves. That's for sure. Let's just say that. They are certainly not hurting their case if they can announce a nice practice facility in the month of June.
Big time. And before someone puts me on knees and O's, Derek Smith played wing for the Flyers. It was Peter Zezel in the 2C.
Zezel, right, yes.
I'm just looking at the team, though. No, like, Tim Kerr was a terrific player for a short period of time, a big power forward, short area goal guy. Scott Mellenby, who was a young player on the 87 Flyers, turned out to have a marvelous career. Tocchet, Brian Propp was a damn good player. Murray Craven is, saw him here in Vancouver, a good player. Berube. But I'm just looking up and down this roster, and the defense was quite good. I mean, Mark Howe, Crossman, Brad Marsh, McCrimmon. But I'm just looking up and down this
tough team.
Tough as nails team. I'm looking up and down that team, though, and I'm sitting there going, how in the hell did they take the Oilers to 7 games when you look at the Hall of Famers that the Oilers just trotted out?
Because there's not one player on that roster that wouldn't slash you or cross-check you.
Oh, my God, were they tough. And Hextall was the meanest of the bunch.
Yeah. You
want no part of Ronnie Hextall.
By the way, you talk about short,
or really any spring,
small area scoring. Zach Hyman off of his belt last night.
God.
Like, he's just a backboard. That's all that he is. He's just a backboard.
Has somebody done the total distance of Zach Hyman goals in these playoffs?
But he didn't use a scoring instrument. He's just his belt last night. I saw somebody putting out
and Robertson really woke up for them, right? Like, Dallas had gone through 2 rounds here without their best goal scorer actually doing much in these playoffs. So he woke up.
Some kid put out a viral video, just in his basement with ball hockey net of, highlight reel of all of Hyman's goals in the playoffs. And he's just like lying down off his butt, it's unbelievable.
All right. Blake's been our man on the Daily Faceoffs playoff parlay challenge. You can play as well. In fact, we encourage you to games.dailyfaceoff.com. This is free.
Takes 2 seconds.
It takes 2 seconds. You'll get a menu of 8 different selections from that night's game.
I guess we're down to game.
We're game now. Yeah. You side one side or the other. Easy peasy. Nightly winners win gift cards. Round winners win cash. Blake's been playing for us.
I by the way, I easy noticed me yesterday. I forgot what I got on Friday. I had 6.
That's pretty good.
I was near the podium.
Right. And that's the early part of this round, right?
Yeah.
Friday. Yeah. So you're telling me we got a fighting chance. I like it.
I forgot to put in my picks on the weekend. I'm probably out of the round now. Yeah. Distracted. I was working. Anyway, for today,
Grady, you hearing this?
I expect to bounce back for the Panthers. It's a 2-1 series. They're at home. They're going to get one of these games at Sunrise. So I'm going a lot of good news here for the Panthers. Taking the game, taking the under, still staying with unders for the most part. First goal to Florida, highest scoring period the first. I think they come out flying. Barkov assists on the over. Panarin assists on the under. Panarin goals on the under. And Sam Reinhart goals on the over to finish it all off. So for my picks, go Panthers tonight. Even though I do have a soft spot for the Rangers.
Games.dailyfaceoff.com. Let's get to today's menu. J Pat is going to join us. It's brought to you by Greta, 50 West Cordova. Fantastic spot. Whether you want to watch the game, whether you want to post game, or whether you just want to play in the bitchin' arcade, because it's fantastic. Greta, 50 West Cordova, gretabar.com. J Pat's going to join us. And we just left so much on the cutting room floor last week when unpacking Allvin and Rick Tocchet with Jeff. I mean, we did 25 minutes with them, but wow, there was so much left there. So we'll talk Pettersson, we'll talk Höglander, we'll talk trade, we'll talk Hurricanes and whether there's a fit there. We'll talk about team roster building, the 3 centers, or is that going to be possible with what you have to do on the wing? Plenty to get into with J-Pat. Time for our Bet365 bets of the day. This segment brought to you by Bet365, proud partner of Sekeres Price. We talked about the Alexei Lafreniere goal in game 3 of Rangers Panthers. I mean, just hang it in the Louvre. It was that beautiful. 8 goals in that game. So the floodgates kind of opened. I do wonder whether we're going to see more offense in that series now. I know you were just talking about defense in it.
I think there's reactions, right? You get a high-scoring game, it's offset by a low one.
Yeah, that's fair. But Lafreniere should be riding high confidence-wise. He had 2 goals in game 3. And he comes with some value to score in game 4. I'm getting him at plus 300. So I'm going there. After winning on a Connor McDavid goal last night, I'm going back to that well with a skilled player. Lafreniere to score at plus 300.
Wow. Well, that's a lot of faith in Lafreniere, who's of course had an
He looked fantastic. I mean,
yeah,
he looked fantastic in game 3. He's starting to really grow. Like I know it was a little slower than probably most people wanted for a first overall, and for a guy who was as ballyhooed and got as much run as he got heading into that draft. But you watch him now and you go, okay, you see it coming along. I'm not sure he's going to be a consistent 40 goal guy or anything like that, but I think he's going to be a darn good offensive player before it's all said and done.
I'm going to stay with my Go Panthers.
Kakko's another matter.
I'm going assists on Alex Barkov.
Boy, is he a good player.
And I'm going with 2 assists, and it gets me plus 425.
Well, that's 2 assists.
What?
Oh, it's just a lot of assists.
It's just what he does. It's not a lot of assists. It's just 2 of them.
2 assists.
You get 1. All you need is 1 more.
Well,
that's the way that works. It's not so many.
Well, but
if I said 1 assist,
is quite a bar. I mean, that's 160 some assists in a season. Come on.
If I said 1 assist, you'd be like, yeah, okay. So I'm asking for 1 more of those. It's pretty easy.
Bet365 open an account today. Yeah. So the thing is here, folks,
it's
after he gets the first assist, then he needs another assist,
and then it's
Blake
over.
wins.
But then that's over. It's just the next one after 1.
He can have 3. He can have 4. Blake still wins.
That's a lot.
Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code VANBONUS altogether when opening that account. J-Pat is next.
In a season like this, you never want to miss a single second of what's happening on the ice, and you want to be around your fellow fans, right? Well, Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova, the perfect spot to do so. Hey, if you've got tickets, a great place to pre and post. They've got drink specials every single day. And if you don't have tickets, well, stick around and soak up the atmosphere with all your fellow fans, play all the great video games and air hockey, great air hockey setup as well at Greta Bar YVR. We'll see you there, 50 West Cordova. The Vancouver Canadians are back at the Nat. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
Northlands Golf Course. Download the free app and book tee times with a touch of your thumb. And while you're on course, open the app for hole-by-hole GPS and track your score. 6 to 90-day reservations. Jump the queue. Lock in your date for $10 per player booking fee. Limited daily availability. Check it all out. golfnorthlands.com. We've all heard of the overdose crisis, also known as the toxic drug crisis.
But did you know that it affects men disproportionately?
Last year, 78% of people dying here in BC were men, and the majority were 30 to 59 years old.
It's not easy to struggle with addiction, and the stigma around it can make it harder for people to reach out for help.
There is help and support. Every journey is different, and the thing that helps one person, it might not be the same for everyone.
So when someone does reach out, be compassionate and have open, non-judgmental conversations.
We here at Sekeres Price want to be part of the solution.
If you or someone you care about is struggling, you can find supports and services near you at helpstartshere.gov.bc.ca. And you can also watch powerful real-life stories of recovery on Help Starts Here website.
Joining us now, our Canucks reporter, host of Rink Wide Vancouver, Jeff Patterson, stops by. And Jeff, we had to get you back because there was just so much in that Patrick Allvin Tocchet year-end presser last week, and we did 20-plus minutes last week and still didn't get to all the topics. We'll get to our poll question, Elias Pettersson, here in a moment. But as you sit here and you watch the Western Conference Final with Edmonton and Dallas, one of the things that Allvin mused about is what style of hockey is going to win next year. What kind of team do we have to forge vis-a-vis what we have to get through in the Western Conference? Do you think that they have to some degree, build a team that can get through the Edmonton Oilers, or is that too specific for you going forward?
Yeah, I think that seems a little specific to me. The Dallas Stars are a wonderfully built team. They've done it, without super high draft picks, although Miro Heiskanen obviously was a top 5 pick, but otherwise they've had a ton of success. Both in the first and in some later rounds. They have gone, deep in terms of their scoring. They've built up a defense core, and obviously they've got great goaltending. That looks like the model, but everybody can say they'd like that. It's a lot easier said than done. The Oilers obviously are top heavy. I mean, everybody knows that, and I think we're seeing that some of their flaws continue to be exposed here. Certainly the Canucks were able to chip away at them, and the Dallas Stars look like they have found some soft spots in that Edmonton lineup as well. So I don't think you're building anything to specifically defeat the Edmonton Oilers. As long as McDavid and Draisaitl are there and under contract, they're going to be a formidable foe, and we'll see if one year they can ultimately surround them with the right pieces. But I think it's important to remember, this is a Canucks team this year that won a Pacific Division that had 4 teams that were all well above 100 points. Like the Vegas Golden Knights were a wild card team, the defending Stanley Cup champs, and we know the sort of the issues they had as they navigated their season. But even at that, I mean, they were a wild card team that finished with 106 or 7 points, and that's why it's important to nobody really talks about the Los Angeles Kings, but the pieces that they've got there, a couple other players, Doughty and Kopitar, are aging, but they've got some nice young pieces as well. I don't think the Kings are going anywhere. So, the Canucks are right now just in a cycle where I think the Pacific Division stands to be a tough division to win and ultimately to get out of. And they saw that firsthand this year.
Do you think that in the Eastern Conference or in another year in the Western Conference, this is a conference final team, that this team could have gotten farther in another year when the West wasn't so strong? Because we said this at the outset. I mean, the 8 teams that made the Western Conference playoffs were playoff teams through and through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is where we play the what-if game. Could Thatcher Demko have won them one more game against the Edmonton Oilers? Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. Goaltending ultimately wasn't their issue, but they didn't have the race to play in that entire series. Obviously, Brock Besser out in Game 7. Goal scoring wasn't an issue in the first half of the season. Everybody knows that. The Canucks stylistically chose to try to defend their way to victories down the stretch and into the playoffs, and had a ton of success using that method. But ultimately, it felt the deeper that Edmonton series got, certainly Game 6 and 7, when you had the Oilers on the ropes and a chance to eliminate them, it felt like the game plan was try to win those games 1-0. Now, they eliminated Nashville with a 1-0 win. So maybe in their minds, that was the blueprint. But the minute the Oilers score, all of a sudden you need 2 goals now to win playoff hockey games. And we saw that late in the Edmonton series, offense was tough to come by. Now, power play could have cured some of that, and I have to think that that is going to be an area of focus for the Vancouver Canucks through the offseason and into next year. They've got the component parts. That power play just has to dig in and be better ultimately. But I think that they're fooling themselves to some degree. We said throughout the season that scoring wingers were an issue, and then they traded one of the few that they had to Calgary to get Elias Lindholm, and they wanted to address the position down the middle. But goal-scoring wingers remain an issue for the Vancouver Canucks. And so ultimately, I think given the challenges they had with the injuries and just and every team has warts in a salary cap era, it felt like the Canucks, some of them were underperforming players and ultimately just a lack of goal scoring from the wings.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feel like pushing the second round to the limit to a game 7 might have been as far as we truly could have expected this Vancouver Canuck team to go. That said, they boiled it down to one game, winner take all, to punch their ticket to the Western Conference Final. So yes, they were that close, but I do think they have to recognize that there were still some shortcomings that held this team back.
And 100% right, Jeff. It's just when I hear Allvin talking about how he liked the 3 centermen and they got within a game of advancing through Edmonton because they had that depth in the middle, because they were able to match up defensively. And so I think they really liked that arrangement. And yet, can you play that arrangement and still have enough cap space? Because that's going to mean keeping Elias Lindholm or finding another good centerman. Can you play that arrangement and still have the cap space to add the sorely needed winger?
Right. And that
to finish some of those chances.
That seems like the $8 million question here. Because at this point, if you're going to deploy Miller, Pettersson, and Lindholm as centers, one of those guys is your third line center. Is it a struggling Elias Pettersson? Are you going to have a nearly $12 million third line center? The economics don't really add up there. I certainly hope. And I mean, that is the biggest. It doesn't matter what the Vancouver Canucks do the offseason. Getting Elias Pettersson back to star form is the most important thing for this organization moving forward. But, Elias Lindholm provided value in the playoffs. Like, he was good for them in the playoffs, produced offense, killed penalties, took faceoffs, did all the things that you wanted from Elias Lindholm. But yeah, I'm just not sure that you can stack 3 centers at that price point, and you've got cost certainty with Miller and Pettersson. You don't know what Lindholm's going to come in at, even if he wants to be here and take a discount. This is a right shot center, guys, that's going to be one of the most sought after pieces on the open market. There's a team out there that's going to give him what he wants. Just that's the way the economics of free agency work. So I just don't know that the Vancouver Canucks can get back into that mix. Now, it also presents a bit of a smaller issue for the Canucks. If Lindholm goes, and we don't know how they address that, but they've got Pius Suter who can play the middle. If they retain Teddy Bluger, we're back to a world where they have no right shot centers. And we heard Bruce Boudreau lament that. Rick Tocchet at times lamented that before they made the Lindholm trade. Neil Zaman is a center, but he's a left shot guy as well and isn't particularly good on faceoff. So, I just think from a coaching standpoint, you want flexibility. If you're building the optimal lineup, you wouldn't have a pitching staff of all righties. You just wouldn't do that. And this is the big leagues. Like, I think that was a flaw in the way that they worked for a couple of seasons. And so again, just something to be mindful of as they move forward here. If Lindholm doesn't come back, they're going to be back to a point where they've got nothing but left-handed centermen.
We're talking, and on the center front, like, you look at LA and how they built. They added Dubois, and they didn't get enough out of Dubois, but they were 1, 2, 3 down the middle. You look at Vegas and how good they were in their cup year. They had 3 exceptional centermen, and then in this playoff format, you're probably going to have to get through 2 divisional teams, right? Each and every year. So I can understand why Allvin's thinking, struggling with, do we have to redeploy the assets that we otherwise would take and use at center and put on the wing after what was a glaring problem for them? And yet it's a little bit, to steal one of Tocchet's phrases, robbing Peter to pay Paul here. Because if you get weaker in the middle, this is a difficult division to match up with at center ice.
Jeff, Rick Tocchet admitted that, he needs to adapt a little bit to find more offense and be better in open play, if you will, and in transition. But with that said, how much of what we saw with Elias Pettersson, because the timing is almost exact of when his struggles started and when really the defensive tactics of Rick Tocchet, started to solidify. How would you quantify the percentage of the system impeding Elias Pettersson versus just Elias Pettersson's own self struggles?
Why, 5-on-5, it may have had some, but there's no excuse for this power play. Like, they all should have been able to jack their point totals just based on a power play being somewhat productive. And, when Elias Pettersson skated out of Pittsburgh in mid-January in the midst of that run where he and Sam Reinhart led the National Hockey League with 14 goals in the month of January, guys, like, it's May. January's not that long ago, and Elias Pettersson led the National Hockey League, or at least shared the NHL league lead in goals. Like, he's done it. It's there. He's got to figure out where it went and why it went away. They've got to surround him with better players, there's no doubt. But for all the 5-on-5 struggles, there are no excuses for that power play not being more productive, and ultimately it could have been the difference maker. So, there are factors, without a doubt. The fact that they continued to roll Pettersson out there with Ilya Mikheyev, it feels criminal to some degree. Nils Höglander had an incredible season, but so much of his pop came early as a bottom line guy. When he played higher in the lineup and into the playoffs, even he struggled a little bit. Like, there just wasn't a ton of chemistry with Pettersson and Höglander, even though it felt like the coach was trying to force that, but he didn't have a lot of options, obviously. So, look, Pettersson was on pace for 111 points in the middle of January. Clearly didn't get there. Quinn Hughes was on pace for a 100-point season and should have got there too if that power play had been a little bit better. But, JT Miller got to 100 points in this system under Rick Tocchet. Now, he and Besser obviously were in lockstep all season long, and he had a finisher there. But, it didn't hold JT back. I'm not sure that you can say the system itself was responsible for the downfall of Elias Pettersson.
Speaking of, we'll ask you the poll question, Jeff. Is there any part of you that thinks an Elias Pettersson trade is coming this summer?
I don't feel it. I just think you work so hard to unearth these kinds of players. This is a 25-year-old who's better than a point a game in his NHL career of over 400 games. So we're not talking about a season or two. He's played 5 full seasons, and he had the one that was cut short where he was limited to 26 games. He has bounced back before. He had the wrist injury. They shut him down. He comes back. He becomes a 102-point player a couple of years later. I do think, we've talked about this, he's a perfectionist, and I do think that this is going to eat away at him, and the fact that people are doubting him now. Is the noise level going to go up because the expectations are going to go up? Yes, absolutely. That comes with the territory of being, the highest paid player in the history of the franchise. But I do think he is driven to get back. And as I said, it was there. And, I was just looking at his season the other day, guys, and I had forgotten, like, he had 19 points in the first 10 games. He was the first player in the NHL to get to 25 points this past season. Like, he got off to an incredible start. And then there was a little bit of a dip, and then there was that January, was the third star of the month and had 14 goals and 21 points in 13 games. So it's there, and he's just got to figure out, was the knee that much of an issue? Is the knee a smokescreen? Was it the teammates, the line mates, whatever the case? But, you've made this investment as an organization in him and committed to him. I do think it would serve them well to find him a lot better line mates than he was forced to play with for much of the second half of this season.
I can't relate to the contract being a distraction. Waiting to sign a contract of that magnitude, that wouldn't stress me out. That would only excite me and energize me. But did the contract play a role in this, do you think?
I think at the time, that press conference on that Saturday morning to announce, he talked about the noise and the fact that, I do think that there was all that chatter that maybe led him to making the decision, because for the longest time, it looked like he did want to punt until the end of the season. Something happened. And I'm with you. Like, if he feels that, like, they broke him to sign this contract, he's getting $92.8 million out of it. He'll be okay in the long run that way. But, back to your question, Matt, about considering a trade, I don't see it. And I recognize the situation. I'm not here to defend his playoff performance at all. That was unacceptable. He was in uniform on a nightly basis. They needed more from him, and he didn't deliver. So, but it feels like it would be a rash decision. Again, you work hard to get these types of players I think it's a pretty small list over the history of hockey where 25-year-olds with a 102-point season on their resume are being dealt, and I doubt you win many of those types of trades in the long run. So I get Jim Rutherford and his impatience, and I know what Tocchet said about having to sort of toughen up and play through things. Through it all, when this guy is on, he is one of the best players in the National Hockey League. They just need to figure out how to get him back and to be on a nightly basis moving forwards here to be a difference maker for the Vancouver Canucks.
Of course, it was a offer or interest, and we'll never know how genuine it is, from the Carolina Hurricanes that was reported as one of the reasons why Pettersson got to the bargaining table when he did this past season, despite saying for all those months, wait till after the season. Carolina being connected with the Vancouver Canucks again here, Jeff. Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Martin Necas, what do you think? Do you think there's the opportunity for these two sides to get together on a deal, whether it's Pettersson, whether it's Hronek, whether it's beyond those two players?
Yeah, look, I understand why they were being linked here. And Carolina, for all the praise that organization has received over really the last decade as one of the best run and managed groups and best coached groups with Rod Brind'Amour, they fall short every year. They just do. And maybe it is time that they step back and try to figure things out. And they're going through a management change. And so a lot of times we'll see a new manager come in and try and put a stamp on a team and make a splash. But we also know that, this isn't a team that just does things flippantly. That's not how the Carolina Hurricanes operate. And so, if they're moving off a player, I think it's fair to wonder why, to make sure that you do your homework there. Look, Martin Necas is an explosive player. He's a flashy guy, but he took a big step back this year. Like, he was a 71-point player a year ago, and it looked like that was going to be the breakout season. Now, the goal total didn't drop that much. I think he went from 28 to 24. So the goals were there in line, but his overall point production dropped off by 18 this year. So, I think it's important to look at the reasons there. But in saying all that, what do the Vancouver Canucks need? They need scoring help. That's what he is. He's a winger that has finish. Would he fit into a Rick Tocchet system of structure? Because what I know of the player and what I've heard people talking about this week is, improvises at times, a little bit of a freelancer. But like the good goal scorers, sometimes you got to go off script a little bit to make some things happen. So we know what happened to Andrei Kuzmenko, though. He did a Rick Tocchet system. And I'm not saying that would happen, but to me, that's just, I kind of look at the through line there and think, okay, you're going to have to pay to get a player like this. You bring him in. Is he going to be the right kind of fit for this coach and his structure and his system?
Well, and that's a very good shout, Jeff. And one, I too would share the concern on that. The other thing is, we do have a head coach who's doing a deep dive into his system, right?
Yeah.
And wondering about how do we create more rush chances. So I take Tocchet for his word. I think he's going to be a little more flexible going forward. Frankly, there's a part of me that wonders whether Kuzmenko might succeed in Tocchet 2.0 if it's coming this fall. But I think that's something that Rick Tocchet is going to have to relent on a little bit going forward. And it sounds like he's already there in terms of having the discussion and with himself, the self-evaluation.
Do you guys remember how many goals Kuzmenko had as a Calgary Flame? He had 14
Yeah,
goals.
it was a good number of goals.
Like, he scored it. So, getting a player back like that, freelancing be damned, somehow, some way, whether it's a trade with the Hurricanes, Jeff, or not, there needs to be an acquisition. And that's sort of the crux of the poll question as well, is there has to be a big splash here somewhere. Like, I don't know if they can just roll the dice on a guy that they think might be able to make a Niels Höglander kind of jump. Like, I think they need a certified winger, don't they?
No, absolutely they do. And it's interesting, just, in terms of raw numbers, Necas scored 24 goals this year. Well, so did Niels Höglander. So,
right.
if the Hurricanes had been linked to Höglander in the past, if that's kind of price, like, we don't know ultimately what Necas is going to demand, but he's in for a massive raise. Just keep in mind that Nils Höglander scored the same number of goals this past season at essentially what will be 1/6 of the price. So I would hate to see them move off Kuzmenko and his 39 goals and then Nils Höglander and his 24 on a team that is looking for guys that ultimately have the finish to put the puck in the net. But these are the massive questions that are facing Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford and that staff. But it feels like they have earned the benefit of the doubt. The offseason that they had a year ago, addressing the needs, the way that they took Anthony Beauvillier and repurposed money to go and address a need on the back end and get Nikita Zadorov. Now they sort of have to do that in reverse because I just don't think that they're going to be able to keep both Zadorov and Hronek. So can you take whatever money you were going to spend on those guys and turn that into a scoring winger? They've got their work cut out for them, but that's what it's going to be a fascinating. And I say off season, but really so many of the decisions are made in the first couple of days of July. Like we're just over a month away from seeing ultimately, how this group shapes the Vancouver Canucks for next season and beyond.
Yeah, well, and the NHL draft as well, right? That is typically
as a trading ground. Yes,
it's typically, and we're at 1 month to the day, right? June 28th is when the NHL
That's
draft.
the crazy part. And as Jeff points out, we're 5 weeks away from probably getting a pretty good face of next year for the Vancouver Canucks. It's not far away.
We sure are, and we'll be talking about it all spring and summer long, including on Rink-Wide Vancouver, Jeff, because you guys are going to be going this summer. Just tell them what you've got planned coming up on Rink-Wide.
Yeah, I mean, the season's over, but we're not going dark entirely. I've got to get some dental work done this week, so we may not push out a pod this week, but it seems relatively quiet on the Canucks front, although that can change in a heartbeat, obviously. But we'll continue to weigh in on the news and notes that filter out through the offseason, and ultimately as we work closer to the draft, as you guys said, no first rounder, no second rounder this year. So we could all be playing the waiting game on the second day of the draft, unless the Canucks are able to recoup some picks somewhere along the way. But there's never a shortage of news and storylines and talking points. And, I think we've proven that today, that even though the games have been over for more than a week now, still so many hot button issues in and around this Vancouver Canuck Hockey Club.
Incredibly so. This is a huge summer for them, being, let's face it, a little ahead of schedule, but, now comes the heavy lifting. It is harder to get from the Final Eight to the championship level than it is to get from the depths of even where the Canucks were down the league standings into the Stanley Cup playoffs in the second round. Great stuff, Jeff. Best of luck with the dental work. We'll catch up next week, my friend.
Thanks, guys.
Great Clips is the official hair salon of the National Hockey League. There are 37 salons in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, all Canadian owned and operated. Download the app and find the nearest to you. When you're up next for a cut, you'll get a ready next text. Great Clips. It's going to be great. Sekeres Price from Wall Center, presentation Applewood Auto Group. You can text us 778-402-9680 to the Great Clips text message inbox. It is time now for the Golf Report, brought to you by the Whistler Golf Club. And the PGA Tour arrives in Hamilton for the RBC Canadian Open in morning.
Yeah.
After the death of PGA Tour player Grayson Murray, an incredibly sad story. He was playing in the event last week, the Charles Schwab. He withdrew on the 17th hole. He had played pretty good golf up until that point, withdrew on the 17th hole, and seemingly went back to where he was staying and took his own life. He had struggled with addiction in the past, and it just sent a thunderbolts through that tournament and through that field, as many were playing with heavy hearts and watery eyes.
And for the guys, too, that played with him, Peter Malnati breaking down in tears the next day. And he's not even a best friend of Grayson Murray. He said didn't know him that well, but just to know that he was there with him in his final moments, Malnati was just overcome on TV. It was tough to watch.
Can't imagine.
Yeah.
And of course, the RBC Canadian Open has been the site of 2 consecutive bombshells on the business side of men's golf. 2 years ago, the establishment of the Live Tour, Greg Norman poaching players from the PGA Tour. And then, of course, last year, where we learned that the PGA Tour, after crying foul, going to Congress even, different senators and Congress people, and saying this can't be, announced a tentative deal with Live Golf, which still has not been executed. Boy, we're a year on, Blake. I'm very surprised that it's lingered this long. Of course, there was a deadline, albeit a soft, contrived deadline of the end of 2023 to get a deal done. But, we're now 5 months deep into 2024 and still no resolution to the great divide between the PGA Tour and Live. And because of that, we are seeing weakened fields on the PGA Tour now. Doesn't help when you lose players of John Rahm's stature, Brooks Koepka, Bryson DeChambeau. That all said, it's a pretty good field for the RBC Canadian Open. The players really like Hamilton as a venue for a number of reasons. It's an old school golf course. It's somewhat like Shaughnessy in that a lot of the top players go to Hamilton and go, great. The course itself is going to eliminate a good part of this field. Players don't like the easy course. At least top players don't like the easy courses because they feel like that brings a larger swath of the field into play, right? When there's tons of birdies and eagles available. Glen Abbey, for example, with the short par fives, you had a lot of players griping about that course because it just really wasn't a test anymore of the PGA Tour professional, particularly not at the top of the field. So this week in Hamilton, you got defending champion Nick Taylor, and boy, what an encore that would be. You have two-time winner Rory McIlroy, and remember the scenes 2 years ago, just the absolute party there at St. George's where McIlroy won. Tommy Fleetwood, Shane Lowry, Tom Kim, Adam Scott, Sahith Theegala, Sam Burns, Cameron Young are all going to be there, and by the new standard, that's a pretty good top of the field.
That's decent. Consider it's not an elevated event.
Right. That's
going to be amongst the better fields for a non-elevated event.
No Scotty Scheffler. That's too bad.
Yeah.
He's a big drawing card. No Xander Schauffele, but all things considered, pretty good. 25 Canadians in the field this week. We mentioned Taylor. Adam Hadwin, if his clubs make it.
Oh, my goodness. He's been tweeting about this, folks. They've been on the ground for, I think, 24 hours in Denver at the last check. And Air Canada is telling Adam Hadwin, we don't know. Just move on. We'll tell you when we find them. So we've all been there, Adam. We've all been there.
Yeah, no, exactly. Remember we went on that Canucks listeners trip once to New York City and Boston. My luggage didn't
never arrived.
Well, it arrived in Boston on the day we were leaving. Captain Dennis of Air Canada, a listener to the show, finally tracked it down for us.
Several visits to TJ Maxx to refresh the underwear.
Yeah. Well, you introduced me to what is it? Century 21.
Yeah, which was
a lifesaver in Manhattan. I'm sitting there going, oh my God, I need clothes in Manhattan. How expensive is this going to be? So anyways, we're with you, Adam. We hope your clubs.
I hope he's got a backup set.
Usually the
manufacturers would come out of the woodwork. Still, that's not your set.
Usually have a truck there and clubs and all sorts of backup
gear. But maybe not tweaked exactly to your specifications.
That's fair. Amongst the other British Columbians that are in the field, Surrey's Adam Svensson, of course. I know Roger Sloan plays out of Calgary now, but he'll forever be Merritt's Roger Sloan. When we had him on the show a couple of years ago, he loved Merritt's Roger Sloan. Kimberly's Jared Dutois. And then a couple of Vancouverites I want to shout. Jake Lane, who's a regional qualifier out of the Pitt Meadows Golf Club. And then Vancouver's Stuart McDonald. He got a special exemption into the tournament for his strong play on the PGA Tour Americas. He won the Peru Open. He got into the PGA Tour field at the Mexico Open and finished in the top 25. So he's into the RBC Canadian Open. And of course, we have seen some of these underdog Canadians take us on rides, have journeys at the RBC. Adam Hadwin back in the day comes to mind.
More going back when there wasn't strong contender. David Moreland, remember, it went on a run there. But you never know.
So, our fingers crossed. We had a hell of a ride last year with Nick Taylor, a putt for the ages, one of the seminal moments in Canadian golf. And it would be really neat if there's a Canadian there late on Sunday contending yet again. Looking forward to the golf tournament. That's the Golf Report today, brought to you by the Arnold Palmer Design Whistler Golf Club. It's now open for the 2024 season and play into rave reviews. Tee times for any time during 2024 can be booked online. And if you have a group of 12 or more, you, the group organizer, plays for free. For more information or to book online, visit whistlergolf.com.
Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.